Hey guys, Sting here. Today we are going to do another look at Spaceman BTC's indicators, and we're going to be looking at the new one, the Asteroids belt. And um, yeah, we're going to go through, you know, why I think it's a good context clue in addition to market profile. And then we're going to look at three specific setups that you can use, that you can take within the actual bands themselves to complement your trading setups. So yeah, let's get right into it. So right now we have a 30-minute BTC Coinbase chart up, and I just have the volume, right? So normal trading volume. I have the space-time profile, which is the daily trading profile, and then I have the asteroids belt. I have the comet coloring added here as well, and we'll go into that, how I add that in. But these are the main indicators I like to use together. You'll notice today I don't have the volume profile on the right-hand side of my chart. For this is all we kind of need right now. So we're going to start right here. So many of you kind of remember from my market profile course as well as the market profile video that I use market profile a lot for context, right? I want to see if whether we're in a range, if we're whether being expansive or bracketing or trending, right? I want to see what price is telling us. I want to see where the anomalies are. And I think this is actually a really good tool to kind of show us the same thing as well. Um, Not the same exact anomalies and value migration and that kind of stuff, but it gives us a good direction of what's going on in the market, where is the market stalling out, why is it doing such, and I think if you can use this in confluence with market profile, it's really powerful. So we'll go ahead and start and talk about that. So we'll just use this last leg and just kind of move down as a kind of example. So we have this kind of compression kind of area. And you can see that the asteroids belt is bearish here, right? And so I'm not too concerned about the color flips. I'm more concerned about where price is in relation to the belt. And that's going to kind of go into the setups that you'll see. So even though we do get a bullish flip, bullish flip here, bullish flip here, bullish flip here, on the choppy kind of like intermediate kind of areas, I'm not really too concerned what color it is. I want to see, whether we're above or below this basis line, first of all. So we kind of saw we're chopping here. We're below this basis line. This is one daily profile. You can see that this, it's held this value area low in here, and then it breaks down. It's still below the band. It's still below the band. We finally get back above the band, right? So now we're holding this band, the basis line. Now we're holding the basis line, and then we break below it, right? So when we see this and we see this chopping around the band, we can see this as, ranging compression. It's kind of a bracketing environment, right? When we see a clean move away from it, and here we see that you may not have even been expecting this move down, right? But as soon as you see this break of this band, and we can look at the value area that you would have been playing the previous day's value area in confluence with that, right? So you might have tried to take a stab long here if you were looking at playing the retest of the value area high, and you would have probably gotten stopped out at this low right down here. Or once this fails and you do get stopped out down here, you kind of see that we broke down from this value and the confluence of the band, and you can get short right in here or right in here, right? And then you're writing this short down. And now this is where we're talking about context of the band. Well, now we're moving expansively away from this basis line, from the band that we just broke through. This is a pretty strong trending move, right? That's giving us the context of, okay, well, if we're getting a strong trending move from here, we're getting a market profile opening below this kind of range in here that we just developed, right? So if we look at this whole range from kind of, right in here, we developed this massive range in here. And we just broke down from that on the market profile as well as a trending kind of environment forming with the asteroids belt. Well, what kind of trades are we looking for then? We're either looking for two types of trades. We're looking for exhaustion trades on the downside, which we're looking to fade back to the belt, and that's going to be one of our trade types. Let's go and write that out. So three types of trade types that we're going to cover is, okay, one, oh, don't want to change the interval. Okay, so the one is going to be the mean reversion trade, and that's if we get too extended from the bands. Two is going to be the breakout trade or trend trade. And that's going to be, retest of the bands, riding that with momentum. So going with strong. Okay. And then three is going to be actually playing the bands as the range. So we're going to be looking to play aggressive movements into band extremes or the basis. Okay, so those are the basic strategies we're going to be looking at. when we're looking at the bands, right? So this kind of first one shows us the mean reversion trade. So after we have, well, sorry, the first one's actually the breakout trade. So after we have this kind of value area breakdown and you kind of break out of this comet, the asteroids belt, sorry, and then you break down from value at the same time in this kind of value range that's been building. This is the breakout trade we're looking for, right? You're nice away from the band. You've crossed through the band cleanly. There's no kind of retest that you're really looking for down here after we break through value, right? So it's just a nice clean trade all the way down. Now, the second trade that we'd be looking for down here is the mean reversion trade. Now, if we look at Comet's coloring, now this is a very tricky trade, and this is not one that I would recommend, um, doing just off this blindly, right? So one of my favorite traders named Brian Watt, he would kind of say that using a moving average, using the asteroids belt, using anything like this, you kind of look at like a buoy in the ocean, right? So if you're on a boat and you're looking for, there's no landmarks around you, you're looking for that bobber that's sitting out in the middle of the ocean. It's usually bright yellow, bright orange, and you kind of want to know where you are relative to that, right? How far you are, what direction you are, if you're north, south, either west, east or west from that. So this is kind of the same thing. We look at this the same way in the sense that when we're moving aggressively away from this, right, we want to know where we are in relation to that band. And price does tend to catch up with that band. So whether that's price coming up to that band to meet that halfway, or whether that's the band correcting down, right, that's the time and price that we're looking for. So when we initially look at this aggressive movement down, if we add the asteroids or the comet coloring, right, on my chart, the blue movements up are aggressive buying, and the purple movements down are aggressive selling, and we have the kind of like stalling out in the clear candles, right? So we can see the aggressive movement down, and you can aid this as soon as you can use this to aid your trade right here. As soon as we kind of break through this, the asteroids belt with the comet coloring, retest here, we see this kind of stalling out and then aggressive movement. And then we kind of see some exhaustion here, right? We have these aggressive moves down, and then we kind of see some stalling, right? So this is where we're looking for that mean reversion trade, is when we come sweep these lows down here, and we kind of see it didn't really, have very clean sweeps. It was just like by a couple ticks every time. We can be looking for these trades to mean revert back to the band, and we use this as a reference point then, right? So it doesn't always need to be you're taking, a breakout trade of the band, or if we're not near the band and the band isn't really useful, right? Even if we're away from the band, it still has a place on the chart. It still kind of gives us that reference point. And this goes back to context, right? Like, what is the band telling us? What is price telling us? And Anthony Crudell, another really good futures trader, kind of said, price action patterns are great, but with indicators, you can't really force them, right? Like, well, you can form fit them, but if you have a normal setup that you use, indicators are always going to react the same way, right? So you need to employ context in that to kind of bring that bias or that kind of other thing to it. But the indicators themselves get rid of a lot of the bias, right? They're not going to tell you something has aggressive selling if it doesn't, right? Even if you interpret it as such, if it doesn't happen and it doesn't meet the indicator criteria, then it's not going to show that, right? So that's something that's very important to keep in mind as well. Is, as much as your cognitive biases come into play, using these kind of indicators can help. Now, I don't think that you should use these indicators solely alone. You need to understand what price is doing, and adding a lot of these on top of each other can complement things. So start with one or two and then kind of add what you're comfortable with. So now right here, I'm using 3 different indicators here, but you can very well use this information with one or two of them, right? So we can even get rid of the market profile here. We can use the comet coloring and the bands together, right? And so this is kind of the same thing. It's like we use this for exhaustion and trend, and we see trying to like retest of the bands right in here. We can even do, the asteroid or the comet coloring with the market profile. We can look for exhaustion and aggression into key market profile levels or leaving ranges. So like we talked about in here, we're looking for aggressive breakdowns of this kind of range that we built value in, right? In here, we can kind of see that here we can draw this little value area up in here. We can see there was a lot of like weird chopping price action here, and we can see the comet coloring kind of aided us in the sense that like it is aggressive back into here, and then it's like, oh well, it really kind of stalled out and broke down. It kind of stalled out and broke down, stalled out and broke down, and then we kind of get the breakdown, retest this value range, and we see this anomaly in kind of action here, and then aggressive selling, right? So there's a couple different combinations you can use of these indicators. You don't necessarily have to use them all at the same time, but yeah, I think that's really important to note. Now, when you're using these indicators as well, and especially the asteroids belt, I think it's really important that you don't try to form fit settings, right? So don't be scrolling through different time frames to try to find one that works, or don't be trying to tweak the settings to normal, fast, and slow depending on what you want to see on the chart, right? What I would do and what I do personally is I pick a few different time frames. So for me personally, it's the 30-minute, the 4-hour, and the daily. And I will use the same settings on those bands on each one of those, right? So for the 12-hour or the daily, I do use a faster setting. On the 4-hour, I use the normal setting. And on the 30-minute, I use the normal setting. Now, I don't usually deviate from these settings. I leave this the same. And even if I see a setup on another time frame, that's all good and well, but that's not something that I'm actively, flipping through time frames to try to find. So yeah, I think that's just something really important to note. When we look at the breakout trade and we can kind of see it going on in here, right? We're looking for aggressive movements outside of these bands or a trend shift. So now this is where you might want to use the colors. I don't personally, but if you're looking for a strong trend change, right? And we're looking for, it's been a bearish trend. We can see the chop right in here. We can see the continuation. Now it reclaims this band and now it's broken above. Now this color shift also shows that, but if you're looking at the price action with the band, you can kind of see that how we reclaim the band, we're chopping within it, we retest the lower bound, and then we rock it up, right? So if you're using the color change, you can see that as well. And now we're broken above the band. So the color change only really matters to me when we're above the band, because then we could just be entering into this kind of range, consolidation kind of range, right? So when we're looking to take the range play, and this is also a good example of that, the range play I'm usually looking for on bigger picture time frames. So it's usually like the 4 hour, the daily, that kind of stuff. And this is kind of similar to like an Ichimoku kind of edge to edge kind of play. And what we're looking for is just kind of like a reclaim of the band, and we're looking to take it to the other side or fade it back down. So in this example, right, we can kind of see that there's a lot of volume built up right in here, right? This is a decent range. And if we had the volume profile, we could probably see this a lot easier. And so we can see that this range and this reclaim of this band. So you could long this reclaim of this band and look to take it to the top end of this range where it's kind of confluent with the consolidation here of the volume profile, right? So you can pull this down a little bit and you can see this is a little 30-minute demand zone, right? Or supply zone, sorry. So you can kind of see how this kind of reacts, and you can use the confluence of the edge of the band and the lower bound of this consolidation in here to kind of show that as a target, or even look to take a short right here. Look, take a short down to the lower end of the band, right? And like I said, this is something I'd be looking for on a bigger picture time frame, but it does kind of play out on every time frame. Now that we've reclaimed this consolidation, right, and we're above the band, this is kind of the breakout trade we'd be looking for. We are coming into a naked POC. So what I would like to see personally is a continuation of this trade, or for continuation for this trade is a reclaim of naked POC. And like I said, just because we're above the band or we're not right at the band right now doesn't mean that it's not important, right? We saw this kind of boat turning. We saw this kind of shape shift in this movement of this band kind of curving upwards, right? And now we're saying that the band might be curling underneath, and the breakout trade would be valid if we take the naked POC breakout, right? So just because we're not right at the band, just because we're not interacting with the band at the moment, doesn't mean it's not telling us something important. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so that's pretty much the three styles of trades that I would be looking to take with the bands. We can kind of look at a few different time frames here and just kind of go through the bands and look at, how price reacts to them. And we'll take it from there. Obviously, these are all benefit of hindsight, right? But this is how we can kind of look to use the tools is you kind of want to understand what the tools do and how they react in different time frames and where you would have gotten stopped out. You don't want to be paper trading. I'm saying, like, oh, I would have gotten in here, would have gotten out there, right? Because it's obviously all hindsight, but it's important to know how the indicators kind of react and how price reacts to them. So if we look at that top, the all-time high sweep, this is probably one where you would have gotten stopped out, right? So you're looking to take this trend, right? You may have gotten in on the retest of the band, and you're riding this trend. And this is again what we talk about, keeping this as an anchor, showing us where we are in the ocean, right? This is a nice strong trend, but as soon as we come back down and retest this trend, if we can't hold this trend line, then maybe we're breaking trend, right? So we sweep the lows right in here, we rock it up, take the highs. Now, this is a trade that you probably could have gotten stopped out on, right? If you had taken this long in here, you get this nice pin bar right off the low of the band. The band is flipped blue if you're looking at that, right? Even though we did reject the basis, this is probably a trade that you could have taken because we are in this volume node as well, right? So we're in the bottom of this nice little node in here. We retested the low. You probably would have gotten long here with the stop loss down there, and you probably would have gotten stopped out, right? So that's one thing that you do have to note is when there is a trend break, you probably will get stopped out with this type of system unless you're quick to identify and you're playing both sides really rapidly, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but understanding that, your profits from the up movement of the trend should outweigh that one down movement or that one retest in the trend, and taking your risk accordingly is really important. So understanding where the failure points of the tools are, or this as a trending tool in the context that we're using it right now, right? Just understanding where the failure points of that. If you're looking at it on a bigger time frame, then maybe you're just playing the range within a much bigger band, right? And this is where multiple time frames and multiple bands can kind of help you. But yeah, that's one example. So like we said, we kind of briefly touched, like this would be a good example of a breakout trade, right? So you're kind of have this kind of downtrend in price. You can kind of see, even draw a trend line, very basic trend line, kind of have this movement down, right? Have this nice little channel. We see it's kind of like retesting the bottom of the bands, right? It's like kind of riding it, riding it, riding it, and then we break above, and then we retest, and we're looking for that expansion, right? We have a nice flip in the bands. We've broken out of this little expansion range. We're riding this band, and then we get a nice move upwards and a nice move upwards, right? So that's how you'd be playing the breakout trade. This is the retest kind of the breakout trade that you would have probably gotten stopped out on. You could be writing, like the little shorts in here, like every time we break down from these bands, right? Every time we kind of retest, you could be taking these shorts as here, right? And this is also the tricky part, is where do you get in, right? Do you want to get on the lower part of the band? Do you want to wait till we get to the midpoint? Do you want to get to the upper end of the extreme, right? So it depends on how aggressive you want to be, right? If you're a scale scalper and you want to be waiting and you want to be kind of scaling in into a short, then you probably want to be scaling in a starter on the bottom, getting in a little bit heavier on the mid, and then really waiting for the top end to get your size on, right? Versus if you're a one clip scalper, you might take a couple shots at this band depending on how strongly or not strongly you feel about this trade, right? So there's multiple ways to approach this, and I also think depending on where you want to take this trade, if the lower, the mid, or the top, that's where the market profile can come into effect, right? Like where is the volume being built up? Where is it looking structurally? Where do we have naked levels? So those are all things you can use in confluence, and I think those will all really give powerful trades. I personally don't use this indicator alone, um, and that's a personal preference. I do everything around market profile to drive my support and resistance as well as traditional support and resistance. So I use this indicator in conjunction with that and order flow, and that's how I found success with it. But you very well could use this with other tools, with the comet coloring, and kind of looking for exhaustion or different kind of niche trades where you're looking for the mean reversion, the breakout, the range trade, and those aren't it, right? Those are just a couple basics examples of what I found very easy with this tool in the past few weeks. So I hope that gives you guys some good insight on how I use this, why I use this, and what I use for context around this. Have a good one, guys.